Hey, it's Kara. Welcome to Kara's Basement from Duran Duran. It is John Taylor.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm all right. How are you?
I'm wonderful now that I'm talking to you. I love your book. I love it. It's called In the Pleasure Groove. You know, Love, Death, and Duran Duran, because really what more is there than Love, Death, and Duran Duran, right?
To me, there's not much more than that.
Exactly. Now, what I found fascinating reading it, and I'm sure there are so many Duranis out there that know, like, everything about you guys. I guess I wasn't aware of the close friendship you had with Nick as a kid. And I thought it was cool how you wrote that, you know, he was the cool kid because his mom owned, or his parents owned a or a toy store, right?
A toy store.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, writing about my relationship with Nick was perhaps the trickiest part of the book. You know, I found that it's easiest, obviously, to write about people that aren't with us anymore, like my parents. I mean, I could just say anything. But Nick, you know, I have such a particular relationship with, and we've got so much in common, but we also see things very differently. And and I had to, you know, and I had to give color and shape to that relationship as it grew, you know, and it's been good to do.
It's kind of cool, though, that you had someone from childhood on to share your dreams with and actually achieve those dreams.
Well, I think you really have to have these kinds of attachments. I think, you know, there are no solo acts. Yeah, I really believe that. I mean, either, you know, whoever you are, you've got to make these connections along the way. And these are, you know, they're almost like they are steps up the ladder to achievement, you know, and it doesn't matter. You know, it doesn't matter who you are. You could be a swimmer. You know, you could be a scientist. You've got to meet the right people at the right time to help. You know, so you're not a freak out there by yourself. You know, and Nick was obviously he was our lives. I mean, him meeting me meeting him. Mm-hmm. You know, that was it. The die was cast, and we had very similar. We had a very similar approach to things.
You talk in the book about how not only were you good friends, but you actually lived really close to each other. So even when Duran Duran started to, get the balls rolling and the popularity built, you guys are still living at home. So you'd like take cab rides home together. And yeah. I found it interesting when you talked about how you were plotting goals during a cab ride home. You're like, okay, Hammersmith Odeon by 82, Wembley by 83, Madison Square Garden by 84. Like when you were saying that, were you kind of joking or were you completely serious?
Well, no, we were completely serious. I mean, I think that today people have goals too, but they're probably along the lines of 10,000 Twitter followers by 2014, a million Facebook followers by 2015, spot on X Factor by 2012. Now, I mean, I don't know what the goals are. I mean, I'm sure that people have they have goals in much the same way. And we were great aficionados of contemporary music, and we would watch as artists would travel around the world and achieve certain, make certain achievements, and that was the plot. That was what we plotted out for ourselves.
Well, I think when you clearly see the goal, it does make it easier to achieve. People don't see the goal; they can't get to it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why it wasn't like #1 album or platinum album or whatever, but that seemed like that was the path. Talk about living at home. I think the funniest thing that I learned about myself and the journey, doing the research for the book was in 1982, which was the year that we recorded Rio. Rio came out in the spring. We left London. We flew to Australia for the first time. It was like Beatlemania there. And we went from there to Japan, and the same kind of really crazy scenes. We went from there to the States. We toured the States 3 times that summer, crisscrossed the country. And then we went back to the UK for a sort of triumphant sort of December tour that ended up with multiple nights in our hometown. And when I checked out of the hotel at the end of the tour, I went back to my parents' house. I was still living at my parents' house. That I hadn't had, things had been moving so quickly that, I hadn't had time to get my own place. And I was just astonished at that. And when I was reminded of that, I thought, oh, my God, yeah. And then I remembered, a few of the scenes that sort of unfolded, and that was funny to write about. That was the real sort of meat, getting at stuff like that. That was what I wanted to write about, because it's hard to talk about that in interviews. You kind of got to write it.
Yeah, it was actually fun to read that part, too. As a mom, I'm like, I wonder if my son will be a rock star and live at home when he's, 20 and making it.
Yours?
Yeah, it'd be cool. I'd like to have a rock star for a son.
I mean, they our parents, my parents loved it. They loved the journey. They would invite, I still meet people who say, oh, I came to your house, and your parents, they invited us in, they made tea for us, then your dad took me to the station. They just loved it.
That's awesome. You mentioned a little bit ago about how nowadays some bands might have Twitter goals. The one thing I really enjoyed reading in your book is how you and the guys used to personally answer fan mail.
I think. Well, that's those. I call them the humble years. Well, you've actually got the time, and it's fun, and and you're building bridges, aren't you? I think there's a little bit of the politician in every artist. I think you have to have that sense of you've got to embrace your audience, and give them some love back, especially at the beginning when you do have the time to do that. And I think we'd learn from the best because we'd all watched the Beatles when we were growing up, and there's that fantastic scene I think it's in Help when they a guy comes in with all the mail, and hands them out, 10 for Paul, 10 for George, 10 for John, and 1 for Ringo.
And actually now with Twitter, though, you're sort of back on that one-on-one, though. Like, you do your own Twitter, don't you? I do. And actually, I was sitting in the airport, sitting at LAX yesterday, waiting to fly out to New York. And I'm having this Twitter back and forth. And anybody that follows me on Twitter knows it's not a one-way street with me. I do engage. I don't engage. I can't. It's not possible to engage with everybody. But you try to make some kind of, some flow. You get some flow going. And I'm sitting in the airport lounge, and I'm actually having this dialogue with people all over the world. People in Australia are just waking up. People in Europe are just going to bed. And it's quite an amazing tool. I've always valued that sense of connectedness. I'm at my lowest when I'm not feeling connected, and I've drawn a tremendous amount of energy in the last couple of years from the time that I spend on Twitter. I get as much out of it as anybody that follows me. In your book, one of the surprising things to me, actually, I'd say the most surprising thing, was to read about how lonely you felt on the road. And you talk about how you dealt with it and some things you didn't do so good, to deal with it. That's incredible for people to imagine when you're that famous, everybody knows you, and you're lonely. Yeah, it really took me by surprise, actually. Those were not feelings I expected to have, although maybe I should have known they were going to come, because as a kid, I'm one of those kids that never really liked having sleepovers. I never really liked, going to anybody else's house. I always liked my own bed, and when you start touring, man, you're sleeping everywhere, and it was, and I kind of missed home, and I missed my folks, and then you start drinking, and I was and I learned to drink and take drugs like simultaneously, which didn't help because I wasn't taking downers, I was taking uppers, and they were just keeping me, I was just up all night, and it was just it was a mess. It was a mess. But you came out of it well, though. Your book is really well written, and it's almost like a good handbook for people going into the business. What to avoid. That's nice of you to say. Yeah. I might need to quote you on that. Feel free. I really wanted to write about recovery. I consider myself extraordinarily lucky that I was guided into rehab. Almost 18 years ago, and on the one hand, that represented a bottom. Like how low can you go? If that wasn't proof, going into rehab, if that's not proof that you've completely screwed up your life, what is? And yet, from day one, the education that I got about myself and why I'd made such a mess of things was such a revelation. And I just, I think part of the message of the book is to just let people know that there are solutions out there. That, even though I know we're in a very rehab-savvy,
these are very rehab savvy times. It's on TV, but there are solutions out there that work.
Yeah, and you actually did it before it was all the rage as well,
It was just, yes, I guess it was just, yeah. I mean, I had no idea at that point how many of my fellow artists had taken that road, because it is generally, it's an area that you're not encouraged to talk about publicly, actually. But it was an important part of my story, and it needed to be in the book.
Before I let you go, I know you got another interview scheduled. Duran Duran had to unfortunately cut their tour short because of issues with Nick. How's he doing? Is he doing better?
Doing better.
Good.
But he's definitely not. He's definitely not up to full strength, because we mostly communicate through email when we're not on the road or when we're not working together. I saw him. I took him the first copy of the book that I got. I took it to him. And he loved the smell of it, is all I'm going to say. And he was just about to take a vacation. I know that he went down to the Med, to the Greek islands. He needed a rest. He's another workaholic, never stops. He doesn't have the off switch in a different way to me. He has a hard time turning off at night. And when you're on the road, you need your rest. You really do.
Well, folks in Chicago need to know that you're going to be coming to town to City Winery on October 30th to do a reading and a signing of your book.
That's right.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I did a few in England, and they were just so much fun. And so yeah, we're going to do one. We're going to do one in Chicago. Can't wait.
And maybe I'm biased, but when I was reading your book, you seem to talk with a lot of love about Chicago. Is there a special spot in Chicago, in your heart for Chicago?
Well, I think we had some of our best times when we first came to. First of all, it was staying at the Ambassador East, which was just, oh my God, the hotel from North by Northwest. That was, I mean, we still talk about that now. The Park West was a fantastic club in the 80s to play. And then there was that Playboy Club. But we don't need to talk about that. But yes, we've always had a fantastic time in Chicago, and it's a place that we always look forward to going.
All right, well, we look forward to seeing you at 5:30, October 30th at Sea Winery in Chicago. I can't imagine anything better than John Taylor and a nice Cabernet.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Cara.